Lots of raging Placid Lake fans out there, Ben. If only more of them went to see the film when it came out. Love that film. There should be more of them.
More fans or more?
More films.
Well, I think you're seeing the direct, economic process that reason why movies like that don't get made.
That was our focus group. He's Ben Lee, I'm Barry Divola, just in case you didn't guess. The bald guy's the journalist, the guy that looks like a rock star's a rock star. 22 years ago, this guy was going around to every music journalist around going, I've seen this 14-year-old kid who's just incredible. I saw him at a sausage sizzle at Waverley Library, but he's phenomenal. Now, this guy happened to be a guy who had some influence and who we listened to because he's got pretty good ears. And that 14-year-old was that guy that's sitting here right now. That was 22 years ago. Since then, I've lost my hair and got lots of wrinkles, and he looks like a 14-year-old with a beard. He's raised remarkably well. And of course, he's a guy who's had a phenomenal career that's gone through a lot of changes over that 22 years, which is something I want to talk to him about here today. Not only professionally, but personally, been through a lot of changes. So I've interviewed Ben a couple of times over the years, but I wanted to talk to him first about playing devil's advocate. I never interviewed you back in 1998, around the time of Breathing Tornadoes, which was a big breakthrough album for you. But you were a very different person in 1998. And I'm wondering, if it was 1998 right here now, what sort of person would I have been meeting back then? Who was Ben Lee back then?
Well, firstly, for these guys, what he's referring to is I did go through a period where I took it as my sole responsibility to provoke everybody I could into a rage.
In Placid Lake. No.
No, but I think that's what got me the role. By just being as deliberately provocative as I could, in every interview I did, I made sure I said, I am the greatest Australian songwriter of all time, or Breathing Tornadoes is the greatest Australian album of all time. So what was I going through then? I think I was listening to the voices that were telling me this is what a pop star is meant to be. I think I saw all these models of the provocative nature of music and art, and I do believe it should be provocative in its nature, but I think I got confused between shock value and a deep provocation. The kind of provocation that I now see as the real responsibility of art is that it can shock us into remembering that we're a human being, because we live in a mechanized lifestyle and we don't make choices. We go along with society and we forget we have passion and we forget that we're dynamic. And I think I just got a little confused about the type of reaction that I was looking for. So in certain ways, the motivation for me to make my work has kind of always been the same, which was that I've always believed that we should try and get a reaction out of the audience. It's just the type of reaction that I've come to believe is hopefully one that's more generous and actually does good for the person receiving it.
Because there was a bit of a negative flashback at that time when backlash, I should say.
Yeah, well, it was sort of designed that way. I mean, I think if you build yourself up to be, I pictured it kind of like rock and roll wrestling, like you needed a bad guy, and I was going to be the bad guy. I mean, it all seems ridiculous now. It's funny because the past, it's interesting when you have a long career, and I'm sure there's people in this room that in whatever they're doing have had long careers doing it. It's interesting how there's sort of a pressure to continually recontextualize why you made decisions you made in the past and stand behind them to some degree. And honestly, one of the most liberating things that's happened to me as I've gotten older is realizing I actually don't need to do that. That's in the past, and it's not that interesting because it happened in the past. And right now, we're sitting here, and there's a whole different group of forces that are bringing this conversation into existence, and the kinds of forces that have brought each of you into this auditorium. And one of the great things about human life is that we're given new moments continually where we can truly be reborn. And so for me, there's been a lot of what this record I've just made is just about cutting the cord. It's not about continually examining these wounds and what drove me to do this and what drove me to... It's like, it's finished. Mm-hmm. It's all in the past. Here we have a new moment, and let's see what this moment can become.
There was a big change for you, Ben, when you went to India in about, I think it was 2003, 2004, like around there. Tell us about what happened to you over there, and more importantly, who happened to you over there.
Well, that's interesting too, because what I would say happened at the time was that I began to take my spiritual path more seriously. But all paths, external paths, have an end, and that path ended for me too. Mm-hmm. Since then. So I had a teacher that drew my attention to the purpose of life being about giving more and not being as selfish, and looking at music as an opportunity that I've got to give something back.
Had you not been thinking as much as you were writing songs and putting out albums, up to that point, had you not been thinking that as much? Was that a different mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think my initial impulse for, rock and roll music and everything, it was very pleasure-centered. Mm. It was based around me impressing a girl, or people thinking I was cool, or feeling really cool in front of an audience, and I think I knew implicitly in my heart that there was an opportunity that came with a platform, mm-hmm. but I didn't really know what to do with that. I'm still figuring it out. But I, in general, as I began to explore spirituality and kind of, I use the word occult in not a dark way, occult meaning hidden. I started to explore more hidden aspects of my own psyche and of the possibilities of being a human being. It just gave me a new lease on being a musician, I guess.
In fact, didn't your teacher have some advice for you about writing music?
Yeah, well, that advice was to bring people joy.
Mm-hmm. And was that simple? And
that basically that was kind of the point of my art.
And the album that came out after all that was Awake is the New Sleep, which a lot of people probably would know many songs off that, including Gamble Everything for Love, and a song we might possibly hear later, which has been played at this conference many, many times. We're all in this together. So those songs are very different to a lot of the songs you're writing before. There's an openness to them, isn't there? There's almost this wonderful simplicity to them. They're almost childlike in a way, because they're so open-hearted.
Yeah, well, I think something I've always loved about music is I've never been one of those people that thought you should have to have prior knowledge to experience a song. There's a lot of bands that I'm sure we've all gone to see bands where, like, if you haven't already heard the album or you haven't heard a whole story of cultural context that they're in, you have no idea what's going on stage. It's a elitist attitude, I always believe that a song is a connective force that occurs on a very simple level. It should occur on a simple level. So I think I just remembered something about songwriting that I had previously not consciously connected.
And ironically, or perhaps not ironically, it really connected that record, didn't it, as a result of you opening up?
Yeah. Well, I'm still quite confused about the role that type of external success actually has on my artistic journey, because the longer I've been doing this and I realize, this is a craft. This is something that, it's not about being like 22 and in like a sexy world and having hits. It's like something that I hopefully want to get better and better and better at until I die. And there's not a lot of, that's not really an idea sold about pop culture. Pop culture is the landscape of the young, in a way. And when I look at my career, I can honestly say I've learned more from my failures than my successes.
Really?
Yeah. So in some ways, I think, like, so I've got a new album out now, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to sign them after. You can come and buy it. But I think part of me wants to succeed, and another higher part of me knows it's not really about whether it succeeds or fails. It's about what I do with that experience alchemically and how much I use it as a catapult into the next stage of my life. And I've found it to fail is the greatest gift. I mean, I really feel for those few types of artists that really have like the silver spoon where it just goes success, 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 success. Because they don't get the chance to die. I mean, as I've kind of gone down my path, I've realized it's all about dying. We're all on hospice care here. We're all dying. And moment to moment, I mean, what's beautiful about Tibetan Buddhism is that it's a practice of dying. They have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which you can read on one level to actually help people as they're dying, but it's us. We're dying moment to moment. And the opportunity of failing and of having all your dreams pinned on something and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it to the top of Everest. And then you don't, and you're still there, and you realize that that goal really wasn't that connected to your implicit sense of being. That is a wonderful, wonderful experience. And if I have one wish for all of you, it's that you will fail dramatically at something and come to realize that that's not what you were anyway. Am I the only one today who said that on stage? I don't know. I just wondered. Okay, never mind.
You are the first.
Okay.
So you're a winner in your failure.
Okay.
Thank you for encouraging us all to do it as well. I feel like I'm way ahead of you. I've been doing it without you even telling me. So well done. Ben does have a new album that came out 2 weeks ago called Love is the Great Rebellion, and there is actually a song specifically about what Ben's just talking about, which is called Everybody Dies. Tell me about that song, because I hear it's got something to do with some direct experience you do have working in a hospice. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, my last album was called Ayahuasca, Welcome to the Work, and it was inspired by a South American psychoactive medicine from the jungle that really does replicate the death experience. So it's quite transformative. And as a result of working with that medicine and working in groups where people were working together, I came to really see that, kind of what I was talking about, that, so here we are all dying. So my friend breaks up with her boyfriend, my other friend loses his job, and in that moment when I'm sitting with them, the only help I can possibly give them is help hold a space for them to die in. There's really nothing I can say. I mean, there's that beautiful Ram Dass quote, like, at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. We're just witnessing each other dying. And I came to realize that I do a lot of talking, and I didn't have as much ability to actually be a witness to somebody. And that if I was going to be of any use in the world, even if I was the one on stage, essentially I'm making music while you're dying. And that's kind of my job. And you're watching me while I'm dying. And so I got really interested in this whole dynamic of dying, and I don't mean necessarily just the physical death, but the process of psychological death. And it led me to want to know more about it. So I actually studied and became a death midwife and a hospice volunteer. And it all was the same thing to me. It was like whether someone's, like, it's really interesting because usually at the end of people's lives, they often get really quiet and really interior. And they don't want someone nattering onto them or like telling them all the things they could do. Like, they just, if anything, they just need someone holding space for them to be in their process. And I think that's what we all kind of need from each other. We just need someone holding space for us to be in our process. We don't need, I heard Paul F. Tompkins, a great comedian, was saying about one of his friends, and he said, you know why I love this guy? Because the thing he never says is, you know what you got to do? And it's really true that those friends are the most annoying friends because no one really knows what we've got to do. We have to work it out for ourselves. This is the spiritual path. It's about turning inside and getting guidance internally. But often we can offer each other support by just being there and witnessing. And so anyway, all of that, so I was doing all of this work with death and dying and talking about it around the house and hospice and dry ice and all these kind of things. And my daughter, who was 3 at the time, she's like, it sent her into a premature existential crisis. And she started saying, like she'd be going to bed and she'd be like, Mama, am I going to die? Am I going to die? And my wife, God bless her, this is a brilliant night, she turns to Goldie and she goes, no. And I just look at her like, you're setting us up for like the worst conversation. But it made me want to, I then wanted to write a song that was sort of like a kid's song about, because death, part of what I studied around death was that death used to be in the house. The grandparents and the parents would die in the house. The kids would see it. It was only in the Civil War in America when people started dying far away from home that they started doing the, what do you call it? Where they take out all the fluids and everything. I forgot the term for it. Embalming. Yeah, they started embalming, filling people up with chemicals. But that was because of an issue.
Siphoning. I don't know.
What's that?
I was going to say siphoning when you said taking out all the fluids.
Yeah. But the point was that was a response to a particular situation where people are on the train for a few weeks, coming back home. So death used to be something in the family house, and this whole thing with like what hospitals have done have taken it into this medical procedure, and it's like swept away and it's not talked about, and it's like dead bodies are dirty and all this kind of. So I just wanted to write a song that was just like a kid's song. So I wrote a song called Everybody Dies, and I think it's worked because now when I play it, Goldie doesn't bat an eyelid. Like she's just like, oh, Daddy's playing that song again. So.
Wow, she went through that midlife crisis really quickly. There's another song on the album that I don't know what it is about Ben Lee and happiness and its causes, but this song is perfect for this conference. It's called Happiness. It's like he's sponsoring the place, right? But he's just done it independently. Now this song's a little bit special because Ben was mentioning his wife Ione and his daughter. His wife Ione is actually Ione Skye, the actress, and her father is Donovan, the singer-songwriter from the 60s, who is on this song on your album, correct?
Yeah, well, I was driving along and I had this idea and I was singing to myself about happiness. And then like I hit this one point that as songwriters we often hit, we're like,
wait a minute.
Someone's already done that. And I was like, it was my father-in-law. And I thought, when I was younger, and this goes back to how you started this conversation about this period of like grandstanding and being provocative. When I was younger, I really thought it was my job to prove I was an original and I'm the first person to ever say this and I'm very, all this. And I now realize like, in fact, that's the worst kind of art. The worst kind of art is something original. The best kind of art is something ancient and universal and objective. And it's artists I admire the most, like Beethoven and Wagner and Shakespeare. They're people that found ways to remind us of these universal truths. And anyway, long way of explaining that I was less scared of feeling like being called a copycat. And so basically I just thought, well, why don't I embrace this? This is a beautiful idea that these human virtues, things about courage, about happiness, about inspiration, they belong to all of us, and we should return to them again and again. And this should be the subject of our art. I wish there were more songs on the radio about happiness. Mm-hmm. Why is everything about... I have daughters now. It's like every song's about being in the club and shopping and promiscuity. It's like, it's like I want songs about virtues. It's like psychology was like that too. Like in ancient Greece, they used to study the psychology of the hero. They'd study heroic qualities. And now it's so much about pathology and about all the wounds and all the psychic illnesses. So I just like this idea of I don't want to do something original. I want to return to the basic human virtues. So I felt very I'm just going to write another song about happiness. Because, I left out the important thing.
The punchline is...
He'd written a song in the 60s called Happiness Runs. So a lot of people
Donovan did.
Donovan did. So happiness runs in a circular motion. So anyway, I asked him to come and sing on the song, and it was just, it was what it was.
you go to this supermarket and shouting, I want to buy peace of mind. Then people laughing, or people feel that person's mind is something wrong.
Now, this word connections is a really interesting one because our kids today are more connected than ever.
Of course, then when you're in an institution, people call you up. They tell you to perk up. Yeah, perk up, because I didn't think of that.
I should have a happiness project, I decided. As soon as I have some free time, I'm going to do that.